New Mexico! Roswell burning, blinding light, footsteps pounding through the night, desert shadows, tracks below. What's out there? Nobody knows. 50 states of fear, New Mexico. Lights above, tracks below. Land of Enchantment, darkness grows. 50 states of fear, here we go. Dulce buried underground, Taos hums that phantom sound. Ghost towns whisper after dark. Something's watching, something's there. Roswell, Dulce, Trinity, Taos. Skies are burning, deserts alive. What the hell is outside?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening. How are you guys doing? I almost said good morning. What's going on? Hey, you guys, thank you so much for jumping in tonight. You guys are watching 50 States of Fear, New Mexico. This is a pretty cool one. I did some deep diving on some things. Could have went even deeper down the rabbit hole, but I don't want to have a 6-hour show. So we're going to be talking about 50 States of Fear, but before we do, I got a huge announcement right now. Your boy right here, Dano, has merchandise. As you guys can see, here's my hat, one of my new hats. Well, my only new hat. And I have a t-shirt, and it comes in different forms. We could have this logo on the big front or up on the chest area, like a little small one, and I have a polo shirt. And on the back of the polo shirt and on the back of the t-shirt, it says my slogan. A legend begins with a sighting. So, with that being said, you guys, the store is not officially open yet because I have to work on a few little tweaks, but I'm going to let you know it's there. So be on the lookout for a link to the store. All right? And Elephant, thank you so much for that. I saw that. Thank you so much. $10 super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Who is ready for the show? Well, I'll start it, but I want to let you guys know I want to give a very special thanks to Offbeat Paranormal. It is them who I'm going through for my store. And I cannot be more happy, more pleased with the merchandise, the product, very well put together. It's not cheap stuff. And so I just want you guys to know that you guys get your money's worth if you guys decide to purchase any of my merch. What I'm looking at right now is we've got a hat. We're going to do like a bucket hat and like a boonie hat. We're doing a t-shirt. We're going to be doing a polo. possibly a coffee mug for right now. And then we're also looking at possibly like a baseball jersey and like a bowling shirt, which I think is so cool. Um, Back in the day when I used to bowl, I remember having those shirts with my name on the back and things like that. So, but yeah, I appreciate that offbeat, and you guys, I'm glad we paired together. I'm glad we met at the Cryptid Fest last year, Arkansas Cryptid Fest last year. So I'm super glad that we were able to touch bases and form a great friendship and a great partnership in this. So thank you so much. Um, Larry, let you know that I have given your address to Ally Coffee Roasters so they can send you part of your first place gift. I'm waiting for one more thing to get here so I can put it all in the mail for you. All right. So I haven't forgot about you. So I'm waiting for one more thing. You guys, let's get into this. Let's get into New Mexico. Now, when you guys think of New Mexico, you think of deserts and barren land and military installations. You think of UFOs, the extraterrestrial highway. You think of names like Trinity, Roswell, Dulce, Taos. You guys, there's so many things that go on in this state, and we are going to talk about them right now. Let me bring up my information. Now, before I get into the stuff that I really did a deep dive in, we're going to talk about some stuff that, you know, I was looking for one thing that really comes to mind when you think of the American Southwest, and it's the chupacabra. Chupacabra. Okay. So when I went to really looking about New Mexico's blood sucking cryptid, I was not really able to find anything of like reports that could really substantiate an actual sighting of a chupacabra. Now, they have come up with, oh, we found this body of this strange creature. Come to find out, it was a coyote with mange. So I didn't want to go um, down that road with you guys. But I will tell you that the chupacabra first bursted onto the scenes courtesy of Puerto Rico. So when we hit Puerto Rico, which is going to be right after the last state of 50 states of fear, we definitely will be driving into Puerto Rico like gangbusters, and we're gonna do that country that well, I'm gonna say it, the 51st state. We're gonna do it right. But there's other things that go on, you guys, in the Southwest. One of them where people don't really want to talk about, but we're going to talk about skinwalkers. Now, I had a friend of mine on not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. His name's Jonah. And I'll tell you his story because I have it memorized. Jonah and his wife and their dog were coming home back to Minnesota for Christmas. And it was early, like 1, 2 in the morning. And Jonah's driving, his wife's asleep. Fur baby's in the back sleeping. And as he's driving, he sees something coming up the embankment. And he gets a good look at it. And he said this thing was the size of a deer. But it was gaunt, skin and bones. And it didn't walk like a deer. And when he got closer, he said it resembled a very large deer-sized coyote. So when you think about a lot of times when people talk about the skinwalker, one animal that is always brought up is the coyote. Now, to this day, he believes that's what he saw. But he has that doubt. And there's a lot of times that, when you second guess yourself, you go outside of your normal comfort zone and you start looking for other answers to the questions that you have when it comes to something that you saw. And that's what he did. And what he did is he looked and listened to other podcasts, mine included, and he realized that he honestly believes that he had seen a skinwalker. Now, it's just not that one sighting that he's had with, or that him alone, but there's been other people who have had encounters with skinwalkers. Now, I'm going to save the story for my next release, which is going to be released on August 21st. Now, August 21st is going to be an episode where I had a guest on, and it's one of the more bizarre but intriguing encounters with the skinwalker. And the only reason I say that is this was witnessed in broad daylight. In broad daylight. So, guys, tune in August 22nd for that story, and I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Now, when we go into watching all of the podcasts out there, they bring up certain instances of things. I try to cover a little bit of everything when I do these 50 States of Fear. And we're going to touch on some stuff that some people will say that, well, it's not cryptid. And I agree, it's not cryptid. However, it's part of the lore. It's part of the folklore of the state that I cover. Now, I've heard of this. I don't know we'll call it a legend, okay? And please forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. I tried to listen to how it's pronounced. And it's the legend of La Llorona, Llllorona. And this is a terrifying legend. So when you hear about these chilling legends, this one, also known as the Weeping Woman, it haunts the states, rivers, streams forever. And why does this weeping woman, why does she haunt the state's rivers and streams? And it's not just in New Mexico, but it's also in Central America, South America, Mexico. Yeah. And what she's looking for, she's searching for her lost children. Now, according to traditional accounts, she was once a beautiful woman named Maria, who, in a fit of rage and despair, drowned her own children in a river. Now, realizing the enormity of her crime, she then took her own life, condemning her spirit to wander the earth for eternity, weeping for her lost little ones. Now, the tale is a classic example of the vanishing hitchhiker, a typical folklore that can be found in various forms around the world. In the New Mexico version, she is said to appear as a ghostly figure dressed in white, her face obscured by a veil or a shroud. She's often heard before she is seen. Her mournful cries echo through the night, sending chills down the spines of those who encounter her. Now, like many folklore traditions, this legend has evolved over time. It takes on different forms and meanings in different regions and cultures. In some versions of the tale, she's portrayed as a vengeful spirit luring unsuspecting men to their doom with her eternal beauty and haunting voice. In others, she is seen as a cautionary figure, a reminder of the consequences of neglecting one's family, duties, or succumbing, to temptations of the flesh. Now, despite these variations, the elements of this legend remain consistent. We have a woman, we have a tragic loss, and we have an eternal quest for redemption. These themes resonate deeply with the human experience, touching on universal fears, despairs, and explaining in a part the enduring power of a tale. Now, in New Mexico, this legend is more than just a ghost story. It's a cultural touchstone, a part of the state's rich supernatural lore. For generations, parents have used this like they have many, many other things all across the world as, hey, they tell their kids, if you guys don't knock it off, if you guys go near the water at night, something bad's going to happen to you. Now, I don't know if that's cruel and unusual punishment, but sometimes you got some bad kids out there, and I don't mean that the kid is generally bad, but you know, they like to test you, and you got to figure out some way to get them to do what you need. It's like a motivation. But now this figure has often become a popular subject of artists and writers and musicians, and they inspire so many different types of art and literature and songs. You have your haunted ballads of traditional Mexican folk music to the contemporary retelling found in books and films. The Weeping Woman has captured the imagination of creators and audiences alike, ensuring her legend will endure for generations to come. Now, you guys, this is just more, it's more than just a ghost. She is a symbol of the state's complex history and cultural identity. With its themes of love and loss and redemption, reflects the struggle and the triumphs of people who have called this land home for centuries. From indigenous people who first inhabited its valleys and mesas to the Spanish colonizers who brought their own legends and traditions to the region. Today, this legend continues to haunt the waterways of New Mexico, a spectral reminder of the power of folklore and the enduring mysteries that just lie beneath the surface of the everyday world. Whether it's encountered a ghostly apparition or a cautionary tale whispers around a campfire, the Weeping Woman remains a vital part of New Mexico's supernatural landscape. It invites all of us to confront our own fears and desires and also to ponder the timeless questions of love, loss, and the afterlife. Now we're going to jump right over from that. We're going to jump over to some dogman encounters. Now, I was able to find 2 dogman encounters. You guys know where I go. I go to Vic Kundis' site. He's a great guy, and these are some really, really incredible encounters. The first one we're going to read about is Edie County. Some people may say Eddy County, but it's Edie, New Mexico. And this encounter, let's see here, is in April of 1999. Now, for some background info on this person, they state that I was raised in the deserts southeast of New Mexico on 2 different ranches. So I'm very well versed in the flora and the fauna of this beautiful state. I even used to track semi-professionally for hunters and our local trapper. Now I know, and when I say I know the critters around this state. We always lived on very remote ranches, 50, sometimes 75 miles from the nearest actual town. In my senior year of high school, I moved out on my own, being a part of the DECA program, I lived closer to my job and school, living about 12 miles from Artesia, New Mexico, where my high school and job were. It seemed like living right in town after all of that. I guess my story starts around April of 1999. My boyfriend and I were rooming with a couple in a trailer house just outside Lakewood, New Mexico. We rented a room from them and sometimes watched their two kids as part of our rental agreement. For a few weeks that April, a lot of the neighboring landowners had been complaining about wild dogs coming up from the river and harassing their dogs and scaring their livestock. We were about a mile away from the Pecos River, and wild dogs have indeed been a problem in the area. One guy had even reported some structural damage to one of his chicken coops. The couple we lived with had two dogs, both of them medium sized terrier mixes. And neither of them were on the cowardly side. They had been getting very skittish about going outside at night. So much so that we had to make sure to let them out right at sunset and again right at sunrise because they would not leave the trailer house otherwise at night. One Saturday night at about 11 p.m., and I know it was Saturday because I had neither work nor school. Near the end of the month, the four of us were sitting around watching TV and we're just basically talking about stuff when the dogs, who were asleep in the master bedroom on the far east side of the house, started growling and barking at the window on the south wall of the bedroom. This was really unusual behavior for them, so we got up to see what they were all about. By the time we got there, the dogs had shifted their bark away from the window and seemed to be barking at the wall and along the wall like they could smell something, but it was moving. Now, this was very strange, and when they came up to the end of the room, they started barking, and it just went crazy. Suddenly, from far down the wall, at the same time, about where the kitchen was, we heard a loud thump and a scruffling noise. It was powerful enough that we actually felt it, with it being an 80 by 16 trailer house in all. The dogs at this point just completely lost it. They cried out in high-pitched whines and dove underneath the bed. We all ran from the bedroom down the hall and into the kitchen to see what the heck was up. Peering out of the kitchen window was pointless as it was late. There was cloud cover and the moon wasn't even out. We heard the scuffling sound again and further down the house and went into the living room to see what was up. We were all really confused at this point. Now, the next few moments seemed to happen in slow motion. Appearing in the living room window from the left and looking right in on us from the glass, I don't know what, from the shoulders up, was what I can only describe as a man dog. Its shoulders were quite human, her shoulders were quite human with short, sleek hair, but it had a head that looked like a Rottweiler. And the teeth. Oh my gosh, the teeth on this thing. All four of us screamed at about the same time. I guess that scared it off because it just disappeared. That image is forever seared into my head. Also note, this was a trailer house, so the bottom of the window was easily 6 feet off the ground, meaning that this thing was 7 foot something. No matter how big of a dog or a wolf it was, it could not have stood up and looked at us like that through the window. The guys, being guys, immediately grabbed their shotguns and headed out the door, even though I told them this was a bad idea. Super dark desert night, big unknown critter. Ugh, no, do not go outside. It is a bad idea. I guess they were out looking around for what seemed about 20 minutes before they came back inside and said they couldn't see anything. The light from the house shining on it, and it had been so close to the window, there was the only reason that we saw it in the first place. None of us really slept that night. It just felt creepy. The next morning, I got up early and decided to have a look around and to see if there were any tracks to identify what the heck it was. The grass had weeds. The grass and weeds were on the right side because the house pretty much hid any tracks it made there. Although I did find where it looked as if something had clawed at the siding at the bottom of the house. I'm going to comment on that a second here. In a couple of places, making the thump and scruffing sounds the night before. I then decided to follow the tracks the guys had made, and that was when I made a second and very unnerving discovery. The guys made clear tracks in the sandy dirt, and whatever it was out there did as well, because it was pretty much circling them the entire time they were out there, at a distance of about 40 feet. These tracks I found were huge, canine, and switched back and forth from 4 tracks to 2, meaning it walked bipedally for at least half the time it was circling them. It's just freaky. Now, that's the end of that tale, but you guys think about this. She goes outside, looks around, finds something that looks like something had clawed at the siding along the bottom of the house. Now, if anybody has been around or lived in a trailer home or a trailer park, you have that flashing or whatever you want to call it, the bottom of it to cover up, the wheels and the axles and everything that on the bottom of the trailer. Imagine you're out there looking for this stuff and you see some of the stuff was kind of tore up, and as you're walking by, it reaches out and grabs your foot, pulls you underneath the trailer. That's exactly what I thought when I read this. But that's the first dogman encounter. The second dogman encounter is in Sandoval County, New Mexico. And this was, I believe, in 2012. The skirting. That's it, the skirting. Thanks, Josie. Thanks, Southern Sweetie. Appreciate that. Gator, thank you for that as well. All right, so this one is Sandoval County. My family and another family that we attended church with decided to go camping. That evening, we all went to our tents with our families, me, my husband, and our 3 children and ours. We decided to leave the cover off of ours so we could stargaze. After an hour or so, we drifted off to sleep. I knew nothing of a dog man at this time and would not for years to come. At around 1 a.m. in the morning, I was awakened because I felt like something was staring at us. When I opened my eyes, I saw what I thought was a Kachina doll wolfman staring at me. I thought I was dreaming. And he was telepathically telling me he was going to get my children. I thought, oh, no, you're not. And then something rose up in me, and I opened the tent and booked it down the dirt road with only my socks on, no shoes. I could feel the dirt beneath my feet, and I ran for all I was worth to deter him from my family. Stupid, but that's what I did. When I turned down the end of the road and was about to stay... Hold on. When I turned down the end of the road and was about a ways down, my husband came out of the tent and yelled at me, which caused me to turn. The dogman who had been chasing me went down on all fours and took off into the field. I went back to the tent, and that morning when we woke up, my husband said, "What the heck? Who brought all the dirt in here?" My daughter then noticed my socks, which were full of dirt. I didn't put 2 and 2 together, thinking it was all a dream. Now I know it wasn't. My husband had no recollection of getting up and yelling at me. There are more details I have not added, but thank you very much for letting me share. Interesting. Interesting. So now, you guys, let's take a real quick break. I just want to do this. I want to give some thanks to some amazing um, people who are sponsoring the live shows. Ally Coffee Roasters in Cadillac, Michigan. If you guys love great quality, ethically sourced coffee, check out Ally Coffee Roasters at allycoffee.com. That's OWLEYE coffee.com. When you guys check out, put in the promo code DANO, DANO. That's all capital letters, DANO, for 15% off of your purchase. Now, I can tell you this with all certainty. There are some people in the chat right now who can attest on how good this coffee is. You don't have to take my word for it. I am a customer. I enjoy the coffee. Ask around. If you guys have had this coffee and you're in the chat, please let the people know what they're missing. We're also going to look at the Rustic Supply Company, the Rustic Supply Co. out of Springfield, Missouri. What you guys need to do is go to their Etsy shop. Check them out on Etsy. We've previewed it here before. It is an amazing shop. They have got so many different things in there: cryptids, wildlife, Western motifs, extreme sports, skiing, that type of stuff. And they have cryptids, and they use it's steel. It says where imagination meets the steel. I think that's their motto. But they handcraft all these signages, door hooks, paper towel holders, lamps. So check them out on Etsy. Go to Etsy and look up the Rustic Supply Co. And thirdly, we are going to look at IRC 3D prints. 3D designs, real results. My buddy Jeremy Hansen, he is the owner operator of this. You guys can check him out on Etsy, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. If you need to get a hold of him for anything custom made, check him out at irc3dprints at gmail.com. You guys will not be disappointed. And lastly, but certainly not least, and I don't have a thumbnail set up, but I will say this with all certainty. You guys check out, are they still in here? Offbeat Paranormal. Can you put the name of your guys' website? I've been busy today, so it slipped my mind to make you guys a slide, but I will make you one. That's where my store is. But you guys definitely check them out. Let's see if I have it in here real quick, you guys. Give me a second. A second here. Hold on. Well, gosh darn it. I don't have it. Cool, Matthew. Appreciate that, buddy. Matthew, the dog man guy. Oh, okay. All right. Let's see what we got here. You guys, I will be posting the link for Offbeat Paranormal for their shop in the community page on YouTube, also the Facebook group, and on the Facebook page. Question: can you make Swamp Ape sticker ones? Can I make them? It's blocking it. Send it to me. There's Offbeat by Design. There you go. Offbeat by Design. You guys go check them out. They got some cool stuff on there. And I will tell you guys, I am the only 100% cryptid only store on there. They got a bunch of other little shops on there. They have their main one, and they have some other ones on there you guys can go check out. They've got a bunch of stuff. Paranormal. They got some funny stuff on there, you guys. So don't be surprised if you see me wearing something other than the Cryptid podcast stuff on there. So yeah, just reach out to him and let him know what you're interested in making. I don't know. He can't make stickers. He makes 3D prints. So he makes things like this. He's the one that made this. And he's the one that made Finwood for me. Yes, Chris, they come in whole beans, so you can grind them yourself. Offbeat Paranormal does stickers. There you go. See? Come on now. Let them know what you do. You guys, we're going to jump into some more New Mexico stuff. We're going to talk about the big guy. We're going to talk about Bigfoot. Now, I could easily go over and go to the BFRO and we can click through and talk about this, but I really wanted to bring specific stories to you, ones that really resonate. And so the ones that I found is here we go. It's the 2024 Aguilera encounter. Now, one night of June 30th, the night of June 30th, 2024, father and his 13-year-old son were traveling through one of the most isolated mountain regions in New Mexico when they encountered something neither of them could explain. Now, Erwin Aguilera is a businessman from South Texas, and he hadn't traveled to New Mexico looking for Bigfoot. He and his son, Easton, were on a road trip to California to pick up a dog rescue, a rescue dog, which is admirable. And because that they were already making a long journey west, Erwin decided to turn this part of his trip into an adventure with his son. Now, he drove a 2024 Ford F-150 Raptor equipped for off-road driving while staying near Las Cruces. His son used an off-road navigation app to look for somewhere they could take the truck into the mountains. They eventually settled on a route known as the Chloride Trail, an extremely remote off-road trail cutting through the mountains of southwest New Mexico. They entered the trail at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon. Erwin quickly discovered that this wasn't going to be just an ordinary drive. The route was rough enough that they frequently traveled only 5 to 7 miles per hour. Rocks, elevation changes, and difficult terrain slowed them considerably. But, however, the landscape was beautiful. And it was full of wildlife. Now, during the journey, father and son encountered black bears, including one with a cinnamon-colored fur. They saw elk and they saw deer. They saw other wildlife throughout the mountains. Despite spending several hours traveling through backcountry, however, Erwin remembered seeing only one other vehicle during most of his trip. Now, that gives you guys an idea of about how isolated this place actually is. This wasn't the New Mexico landscape many people imagine when they picture the state. There was no endless stretches of flat desert surrounding them, though they traveled through the Gila Mountains, throughout high elevation country containing forest meadows, streams, and an abundance of wildlife. The location where the encounter eventually occurred was more than 7,000 feet in elevation. Now, by the time Erwin and his son had traveled roughly 70 miles along this trail, darkness was beginning to settle over the mountains. It was around 9:30, quarter to 10 that night, and rain was slightly falling. Erwin had the headlights on, switched on for the Raptor, along with 4 powerful auxiliary fog lights. They were moving extremely slow, somewhere around 3 to 5 miles per hour. Then they came over a change in elevation. The truck's lights swept across a trail. Some of them, man, this is not a fluid read for me, you guys. The truck's lights swept across the trail ahead of them. There was a large tree near the end of the road. And approximately 25 feet beyond that tree, something else was standing there. At first, he could not process what he was seeing. The figure, it wasn't running, it wasn't walking, it wasn't moving towards them, it was just standing there, almost like a stump. But as the truck slowly approached, Aguilera began realizing that this wasn't a stump because it had arms, it had legs, it had a head, and it was enormous. This creature, standing extremely close to the road, reportedly less than 15 feet from the truck, as Aguilera and his son passed it. Aguilera later joked that it was close enough that if his son had been holding a broomstick out the window, he could have almost touched it. And because the truck was moving so slowly, this wasn't a split-second glimpse. They both had several seconds to look directly at the figure while the headlights and powerful fog lights illuminated it. He estimated that they observed this for somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds. His first overwhelming impression of this thing was its size. He guessed it was 5 foot 11 inches tall and around 250 pounds. He knew the height of his truck, which is approximately 6.5 feet tall from ground to roof. The figure was standing on the ground that was roughly 14 to 18 inches lower than the road. Even with the drop in elevation, its head appeared to rise approximately a foot above the roofline of the Raptor. So that gives me reason to believe that this thing was possibly close to 8 feet tall. Oh, here we go. Based on those comparisons, Aguilera estimated the creature at somewhere close to 8 feet tall. His son independently compared the height to a basketball hoop at home that stood roughly 9 feet high. But height wasn't what frightened Aguilera the most. It was the creature's mass. He described it as perfectly proportioned, not tall and thin like a usually tall human being, but enormous in every dimension. Its shoulders were broad, its chest was massive, its arms were huge. Aguilera later stated that his biceps appeared larger than his thighs. His son focused on the chest, describing the creature as looking almost like 2 football players put together. The proportions immediately told Aguilera that whatever he was looking at was extraordinarily powerful, and that's when the fear hit him. He took a look at the size of the creature, then at his truck, and he realized that if this thing wanted to, he believed it could turn his vehicle over. But despite its enormous size, the figure did absolutely nothing. It remained completely still. Its knees appeared slightly bent, its arms hung downward, apparently reaching around its knees. Its hands were curled slightly inward, its head appeared to be lowered, and the creature seemed to be deliberately holding itself motionless. He eventually developed a theory about what was happening. He believes that they surprised this creature. The meadow was bordered by a forest and a game trail crossed the area. He believed the creature may have been moving across the open area when the Raptor suddenly came over the rise. Once the headlights swept across the landscape, the creature had nowhere to run to disappear without moving directly through the illuminated area. So instead, it froze. He believes it attempted to imitate a burnt tree stump, and in that forest, the strategy would have made sense. He and his son had already seen blackened stumps from previous forest fires. A massive dark figure standing completely motionless in the rain could easily blend into the landscape. If the truck hadn't been moving 30 or 40 miles per hour, perhaps they would have just passed it without even realizing what they had seen, but they were at a crawl, 3 to 5 miles an hour, and the lights were directly pointing at it. That gave him something most alleged Bigfoot witnesses never received, a close look at its face. The creature, its hair was long and black, perhaps around 6 inches in length, in some areas. Because of the drizzle, the hair appeared tangled and matted, giving matted together, giving portions that in appearance uh, what looked like dreadlocks. The hair was predominantly black or very dark. He also noticed gray coloration, particularly around portions of its head and face. He later acknowledged that some of what appeared gray could potentially have been mud or moisture. The hair around the forehead hung downward enough that it partially covered the creature's eyes. Because of that, he could not give any detailed descriptions of the eyes, but he could see the rest of the face. The face left an enormous impression on him. The skin wasn't black like the exposed facial skin of a gorilla. What he described was something closer to deeply weathered human skin, a dark, sun weathered complexion with rough and leathery texture. He compared the texture to the skin of an elderly person who had spent a lifetime working outdoors in ranching or farming. And then there was the nose. This is one feature that he remembered most clearly. The nose was large and triangular. The bridge had a pronounced angle, but the nostrils didn't resemble the wide, forward-facing nostrils associated with a gorilla. To him, the nose seemed somewhere between human and a great ape. The mouth was unusually wide, but it didn't it did not project dramatically outward to a muzzle. Instead, he said that the mouth sat relatively flush with the face, giving the creature a surprisingly human-like profile. That combination is what really disturbed him, because what he was seeing wasn't completely human, but it wasn't completely ape-like either. He later struggled to explain exactly what category his mind tried to place it in. He said that immediately after the encounter, if someone had told him he had seen a gorilla, part of him would have accepted that. If someone had told him he had seen some kind of surviving prehistoric human, a Neanderthal or a caveman, he very well would have accepted that as well. He even considered whether he had somehow seen a person wearing animal hides. His brain was searching for anything familiar enough to explain what he had just passed beside his window. He could not find anything. Now, as the raptor continued down the trail, his 13-year-old son finally looked towards him, and he asked his father if he had seen what they had just passed. That moment is important because both had seen it. Neither immediately told the other what they were supposed to have seen. Aguilera told his son yes, he had seen it. And now the fear really began. As they continued down the road, he didn't turn around. He didn't get out with a flashlight. He didn't attempt to photograph the creature. He just kept driving. Approximately 300 yards further down the trail, however, he encountered something he couldn't avoid, a cattle gate. Now, to continue, he had to stop his truck, get out, alone in the darkness. The enormous figure that they had just passed was somewhere behind him. He had to walk to the gate, open it, return to his truck, and drive through. Then had to stop again, get out, close the gate when he drove through. He could not see the creature. He didn't hear it approaching, but he knew that somewhere behind him there was something enormous enough that only moments earlier he and his son had been staring at directly in its face. They eventually continued out of the mountains, but Aguilera couldn't let it go. He and his son began to try to convince themselves that there had to be some type of another explanation. Was it really a stump? They had seen dozens of burnt trees throughout this area. Maybe the headlights and the darkness and the rain and exhaustion had combined to create this illusion. He wanted that explanation to be true. Now, he told very few people about what had happened, but then uncertainty began eating at him. He knew exactly what the encounter had occurred. He knew where it occurred, and he had the coordinates. And if it really was a stump standing beside the road, there was an easy way to prove it. That way was to go back. Now, the problem was that Aguilera lived approximately 1,000 miles away in southern Texas, but he went back anyway. On July 19th, less than 3 weeks after his encounter, Aguilera and his son packed their belongings and began the long drive back towards New Mexico. They returned to the same remote section of the the Gila Mountains. As they approached the meadow again, Aguilera expected to see it. He expected to see the stump, the bush, the strange shape that fooled both of them. Instead, there was nothing there. The tree, he remembered, was still present. The meadow, it was still there. The road was exactly as he remembered it. But there was no giant stump standing in the place where this figure had been. He and his son stopped. They both got out and walked to the exact area where they believed this creature had stood. And while examining the ground, they discovered what appeared to be a large footprint. Aguilera photographed it. To prove scale, he placed his own size 11 shoe beside it. The apparent print was considerably larger. Aguilera believes he could make out what appeared to be toe impressions. There were other tracks and impressions around the area because wildlife regularly traveled through the meadow and the ground had been exposed to the rain. So this footprint needs to be treated cautiously. It wasn't cast. It wasn't examined immediately after the encounter. Nearly 3 weeks had passed. There was no biological evidence connecting it to whatever Aguilera and his son had seen. The footprint, therefore, doesn't prove that a Sasquatch stood beside the road that night, but to Aguilera, finding a large human-like impression in the exact spot where they remember seeing this figure was difficult to dismiss. He became convinced that he and his son hadn't mistaken a stump for a creature. There simply was not a stump there. The experience affected him enough that he returned to the location again, this time bringing his wife. He wanted her to see this place for herself. He wanted someone else to verify that there wasn't some enormous burnt tree or obvious object sitting beside the road that could have explained what he and his son had seen. By that point, Aguilera was ready to talk publicly about the encounter. He eventually submitted his experience to the BFRO. They classified it as a Class A, and that is it for that one. What did you guys think? I see some people jumping in. I want to say hello, hello, hello. Blame, hello, how are you doing? If you guys are new to the channel, new to the chat, drop a one in the comments. If you guys are wondering who I am, the name's on the screen. I'm Dano, the host of the Cryptid podcast. And you guys, we talk about cryptids. A to Z, if it's in there, I talk about it. If you guys, like I said, if you guys are new to the channel, new to the chat, drop a one in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. Let's see who's in here. Everybody, there's so many names here I've seen popping up. Thank you so much for being with me tonight, you guys. Hello, hello, welcome. If you guys are new, please hit that subscribe button. We do these every Saturday night unless I have something planned. So I saw UFO near Mesa Verde. Really? Okay, Melissa. I'd like to hear about that. You know, I like to hear about things like that. I drop new episodes every Wednesday and Friday, you guys, at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. I also do live streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 6:45 a.m. Central Standard Time. So, who's ready for some more Gators Sky Exploration? That's a cool name. What's up, Robbie? I don't know if someone's letting fireworks off or there's a thunderstorm because I hear a bunch of stuff outside. All right. What's up, Wanda? Now, here's another Bigfoot encounter in New Mexico. This is the Red River RV encounter. I read this one. This is kind of crazy. So in July 9th, 19 or July 19, July 9th, 2009, a husband and wife were preparing to leave a campground near Red River, New Mexico, after spending nearly a week in the area. They were staying in a travel trailer surrounded by rugged mountains and forests of the Taos County, not far from State Highway 38. The Red River itself ran only about 20 feet from their trailer, and beyond the water, the terrain climbed steeply into heavily wooded mountain country. Now, for 6 nights, you guys, they stayed in this camping area and nothing happened. Six days, 6 nights, nothing happened. They were having a great time. But then came the final morning. Yeah, I said morning. At approximately 4:15, the wife woke up, began getting ready for the trip home back to Oklahoma. Her husband remained in bed a little while longer before eventually getting up and going to the bathroom. Outside of the trailer, it was still completely dark. While her husband was in the bathroom, she returned to the bedroom. And that's when she saw someone standing outside their window. At least she thought it was someone. The trailer had a separate exterior door leading into the bedroom. The upper portion of that door contained privacy glass, preventing anyone outside from seeing clearly inside the trailer, kind of like a frosted privacy glass. But the privacy glass didn't prevent the people inside from seeing a silhouette on the outside. And there was definitely someone standing there. She could see a dark, large figure positioned immediately outside the bedroom window. For several minutes, she just watched it. Now, according to later investigation, she described herself as being in a state of shock and disbelief. She couldn't understand why somebody would be standing outside of their trailer at that hour in the morning, silently looking towards the bedroom window. Now, this person or this figure did not knock. They did not call out. They didn't try to open up the door. All they did was simply stand there. Now, eventually, she went to the bathroom and told her husband, "Hey, there's someone outside the bedroom." He comes back into the room, and now he can see it. Through the privacy glass, he could make out the silhouette of a very large figure. He could see what appeared to be part of its chest, its head, and approximately half of one arm. His immediate reaction wasn't Bigfoot. He thought that they had a human intruder. Someone was standing outside his trailer at approximately 5 o'clock now in the morning, looking in the bedroom where his wife had been standing. So he reached into the nightstand and retrieved his handgun. His plan was to move quietly through the trailer towards the main entrance at the opposite end. He could reach that door. If he could reach that door without alerting whoever was outside, he could step out, switch on the exterior light, and confront the person who was standing in front of the window. He tried to move as quietly as possible. He didn't want the trailer to rock or shift enough to alert the figure. As he made his way towards the other end, he chambered around in his handgun. Meanwhile, his wife remained in the bedroom. And she did something extremely important. She picked up her camcorder. Instead of recording a video, she switched the camera into digital photograph mode. Then she photographed the figure through the window 3 times. Whatever was standing outside the trailer was now being photographed. And according to the witness, it wasn't leaving. Now, when they were um, they later contacted the BFRO, and the investigator later reconstructed the timing of the encounter. The wife apparently watched the figure for approximately 2 to 3 minutes before going to get her husband. From the time he entered the bedroom until he reached the opposite door of the trailer was approximately another minute to two. That means the figure may have remained outside their bedroom from anywhere between 3.5 to 5 minutes. Now, that's important because it wasn't a 2-second glimpse of something crossing a highway. Whatever they were looking at apparently remained there. It was standing outside and it was watching. Now, eventually, her husband got to the main entrance. He opened the door and switched on the exterior light at nearly the same moment. He stepped outside, expecting to catch whoever was looking through their bedroom door, or excuse me, bedroom window, but there was nobody there. The space besides the trailer, completely empty. But he heard something. Somewhere nearby, he could hear what sounded like bipedal footsteps moving rapidly away along the gravel road towards the east. Now, he searched around the trailer. He found nothing. He couldn't find the person. He couldn't see anyone running through the campground. He couldn't find an obvious explanation as to who had been standing outside his bedroom window. He then returned to the location where the figure had been. And that's when he noticed something that he hadn't considered while he was inside. The window was extremely high. The couple initially assumed the person had been standing there because it was the obvious explanation. But when the husband stood outside and looked at the bedroom window, he realized how high someone would have to be in order for its upper body to appear in the window. He began taking photographs for reference. The measurements were later checked during the BFRO investigation. From the ground to the top of the bedroom door was approximately 8 feet. The glass itself measured approximately 16 inches wide by 24 inches high. There was a step beneath the bedroom door, but according to the witnesses, that step was retracted during the encounter. There was nothing else immediately beside the trailer that someone could have been standing on. And the husband hadn't felt anyone could climb onto the trailer without placing weight against it. Whatever produced the silhouette appeared to have been standing directly on the ground. Now think about what the witness was describing seen from inside. Not merely just the top of someone's head that they were seeing. He reported seeing the head and part of the arm and part of its upper chest. So I'm assuming maybe like bicep and then up. And those observations and measurements, if those observations and measurements are accurate, then whoever or whatever was standing outside the window would have been extraordinarily tall. The witnesses began to realize that the thing that they had assumed was a human prowler might not have been just an ordinary person, but they weren't finished looking for evidence. They went back inside the trailer rather than wandering around the campground in darkness trying to find whatever had just been outside the bedroom window. They decided to wait until sunrise. Once daylight arrived, the couple went back outside and examined the area around the trailer. Near the side of the RV, they discovered impressions on the gravel that resembled unusually large human footprints. The closest impression was approximately 3 feet from the trailer. The witness estimated the track to be roughly 14 to 16 inches long, which they also took pictures of. Now, unfortunately, the gravel didn't preserve enough detail for the impression to provide the kind of clear footprint evidence that researchers would usually want. The photographs were apparently difficult to interpret, and the BFR investigator didn't publish them with the report because the details weren't clear enough. And, I kind of commend him for that. I know whenever I have someone that sends me an encounter and they have pictures, if they're clear pictures, I will more than be happy to show them. But if I really have to look to try to make something out, I don't want to. I'm not going to post them. So I kind of applaud him for that. So the tracks, they can't be treated as proof, but the witness believes something large had walked beside their trailer. And early that morning, they had heard something apparently move away on 2 feet. Again, then there were the photographs that the wife had taken with her camcorder. Because the photographs were taken through privacy glass and extremely low light, they don't provide a clear portrait of the creature. What they show is primarily a dark silhouette. Understandable. Now, during the investigation, the husband was asked to recreate those conditions. He confirmed that light from the television could be detected through the privacy glass from outside, but someone standing outside still couldn't actually see clearly in the bedroom. If this was a person intending to watch the couple, they apparently couldn't see much through the glass, but they may have been able to see the changing light from the television. Okay, that makes sense. The photographs were later enlarged by a photographer who was a friend of the witnesses. According to the husband, his friend believed that some features became more visible in the enlargement, and joked that the figure looked somewhat like the creature from Harry and the Hendersons. Okay. Let's see here. All right. So when the husband eventually stepped outside, dogs in the apparent adjacent trailers, they began to bark. The figure itself reportedly made no vocalizations during the entire encounter. There was no growling, screaming, knocking, nothing. It just simply stood outside the window. Now, the Red River sits within the enormous Carson National Forest. The region contains rugged mountain terrain with elevations extending from roughly 7,000 feet to more than 13,000 feet at Wheeler Peak, the highest point in New Mexico. So, you guys, it was classified as a Class A report. And I think, if this was a Bigfoot, which I have a sneaking suspicion that it was, I think it was fascinated with the light that was coming through the window. So yeah, that's what I think. All right, guys, now let's open up for some real quick. Anybody's got any questions or anything like that? Because they got more stuff. We're going to start talking about UFO encounters and things like that. Any questions? How's everybody doing tonight? Thanks for being here, everybody. Oh, Gator, you do about 30 miles. That's awesome. What's up, Dorothy? How are you? If you guys said hi to me, sorry I didn't see the chat. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Hello to everybody that's jumped on in. If you guys are new to the channel, new to the chat, please drop a 1 in the comments. Let us know where you're watching or listening from. What's up, DK? Eduardo, hello. And also, if you guys haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. When I last looked, I'm 3 away from 9,600 subs. That's my next little goal to attain. And then after there, I'm slowly reaching up to the huge milestone of 10,000. Matthew, you say you are a believer, but you do not want to see one. That's fair. That's fair. Josie, I did see earlier. Sebastian says hello. So hello, Sebastian. How are you? Patrick, hello. How you doing, buddy? Hey, I put in my application today, bro. Thank you for being here tonight. I can't wait to hear from him. I recently posted UFO pics on the community page on my channel and videos of on the Cryptid podcast. And someone said brisket. Richie, was that you? Oh, Homer Simpson when he thinks about donuts. Thomas, how you doing? All right, cool. Thanks, Patrick. All right. So, what do you guys think? Let me ask you this: what's up there, Bear? What do you guys think? What do you think about the intro? I hear people saying, "Oh, it's too long. It's too long." You guys, I did one that was almost 6.5 minutes, and I caught grief on that one. So I've been trying to keep them around 3 minutes. The one I just did for New Jersey, that was kind of like a punk, uh, like a punk, a punk feel to it. That was only 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and someone complained that was too long. So, but oh well. I like doing them. I'm gonna keep them around 3 minutes. That's not a bad intro for a live stream. Phyllis, what's up? Melissa, hello. All right, you guys, let's get back into it. Let's get back into it. Now, the Socorro UFO landing, April 24th, 1964. On the afternoon of April 24th, 1964, something happened outside the small town of Socorro, New Mexico, that would become one of the most compelling UFO cases ever investigated by the United States Air Force. Go Air Force. This wasn't simply a report of strange lights moving across the night sky. That's because the primary witness was a police officer by the name of Lonnie Zamora. And what he described was something far more extraordinary. Zamora reported seeing a strange craft sitting on the ground. Two unidentified figures were standing next to it. And then, watching as the object lifted into the air and disappeared across the New York landscape. Now, when investigators arrived at the location shortly afterwards, they found physical traces on the ground. The incident would eventually become Project Blue Book case number 8766. And despite an official investigation, the case still remains unidentified. It began late Friday afternoon while Officer Zamora was working patrol in Socorro. At approximately 5:45 p.m., he spotted a vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed and began pursuing it. Now, there was nothing unusual about this situation at first. It was simply a police officer trying to catch a speeding driver. But during his pursuit, Zamora suddenly heard a tremendous roar and noticed what appeared to be a bluish-orange flame rising in the distance towards the southwest. There was an explosive storage area in that direction, and Zamora immediately wondered if something had exploded. Believing there could be an emergency, he abandoned the pursuit and headed towards the source of the sound. Zamora turned onto the rough dirt road leading towards that area. The road was steep and difficult, and his patrol car struggled as he attempted to climb it. After making his way higher, Zamora eventually reached a position where he could see down into the surrounding terrain. And that's when he noticed something unusual sitting inside the arroyo. From a distance, the object appeared white. Zamora initially believed that he might be looking at an overturned automobile. If there had been an accident, someone could be injured, so he continued towards it. Then Zamora noticed something else. Near the white object, he saw two figures. From his position, they appeared relatively small and seemed to be dressed in white clothing or coveralls. Zamora was too far away to make out any facial details or physical characteristics. He never described large black eyes or gray skin or any other features that would later become associated with your stereotypical image of an extraterrestrial. But as far as Zamora knew, at that moment, he was looking at two people standing near what he believed to be a damaged vehicle. At least one of the figures appeared to notice his presence. As Zamora continued towards the scene, the terrain terribly blocked his view. When he came back, when the object came back into sight, he was considerably closer. And it's because and it became obvious that this wasn't an overturned automobile. The object appeared white or metallic and was roughly oval or egg-shaped. Zamora, Zamora estimated that it was approximately the size of an automobile. He could not see any conventional wings, tail, or fuselage. The object appeared to be elevated slightly above the ground on what looked like landing supports or legs. He also noticed a strange red marking on the side of the object. The exact appearance of this symbol would later become controversial because several different versions eventually circulated publicly. Some researchers have claimed that the investigators intentionally released an alternate version of the symbol so they could identify people falsely claiming to have witnessed the object. Regardless of which version was correct, Zamora was clear that he had seen a prominent red insignia or marking on the side of the craft. Then, without warning, the situation changed completely. A tremendous roar erupted from the object. Zamora saw flame beneath it and immediately realized he needed to get away. He turned and ran, stumbled and falling at one point as he attempted to reach cover. When he looked back, the object was beginning to rise from the ground, and for the first moments of the ascent, Zamora continued to hear a powerful roaring sound and could see flames beneath the craft. Then something strange happened. Once the object had risen roughly 20 feet above the ground, the tremendous noise reportedly stopped. The craft became quiet. No wings unfolded, and Zamora couldn't see any conventional propulsion systems carrying it through the air. The object began moving away across the landscape, eventually heading towards the southwest. As he watched it until it disappeared into the distance. Whatever had been sitting inside that area only a moment earlier, it was now gone. And the two mysterious figures he had seen standing beside it were also gone. He immediately contacted other law enforcement personnel. This is one of the details that make this incident particularly interesting because the location wasn't investigated days or weeks later. Other authorities began arriving shortly after the encounter. Among the first was New Mexico State Patrol Sergeant M.S. Chavez. Zamora, who reportedly was visibly shaken by what he had just experienced, but there was more to his testimony waiting for investigators at the scene. On the ground were 4 substantial impressions in the soil. These depressions were arranged in a pattern corresponding with the location where Zamora said the object had been sitting. The impressions were approximately 16 inches long, 6 inches wide, and roughly 2 inches deep. Something appeared to have pressed into the soil with considerable force. Investigators also documented several small circular impressions nearby. There was another detail that immediately attracted attention. The vegetation around the site appeared scorched or burned. That was particularly significant because Zamora had reportedly seen flames beneath the object during its departure. He had described an object apparently supported above ground, and investigators found 4 substantial depressions where he had said it was sitting. He also reported seeing flames, and investigators discovered signs of burning. None of this proved that the extraterrestrial spacecraft had landed outside the town, but it did suggest that something physical had occurred at this location. Now, this incident quickly attracted the attention of the United States Air Force. At the time, the Air Force was operating Project Blue Book, the government's official program for investigating reports of unidentified flying objects. This encounter was assigned to Project Blue Book, case number 8766. Military investigators traveled to New Mexico. The landing site was photographed and measured. Witnesses were interviewed, and physical trace evidence were examined. The FBI also documented aspects of the incident. One of the people who became involved in evaluating the case was astronomer Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a scientific consultant to Project Blue Book. He's important because he wasn't originally someone predisposed to believe extraordinary UFO claims. He had approached the subject from a skeptical scientific perspective and had spent years helping the Air Force evaluate reports. But this incident presented a difficult problem. Investigators weren't dealing with someone who had merely observed a distant light in the sky. They had a police officer reporting a close range encounter with an apparent landed object, two unidentified figures, a violent takeoff, and physical trace evidence remaining at the location afterwards. After investigating the incident, Project Blue Book was unable to provide a satisfactory conventional identification for what Officer Zamora had reported. The case remained officially classified as unidentified. Now, that does not mean that the United States Air Force concluded that Officer Zamora had encountered extraterrestrial. It means investigators couldn't satisfactorily determine what he had encountered based on the evidence available to them. How awesome was that? I had never heard about that encounter until now. So, Night Elephant, thank you so much for your super chat. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yep, Thomas, I wouldn't have said a word. That is a career killer. Absolutely. It really very well could be. Very well could be. Now, you guys, let's check this one out. This is a spooky one. La Mala Hora. There are certain legends that begin with a person, someone dies violently, something terrible happens, and the dead refuses to leave. But hidden within the folklore of New Mexico is something different. Something that doesn't necessarily have a grave, a murder, or even a human name. It doesn't haunt an old hotel, a lonely road. It doesn't wander through abandoned homes. According to legend, it waits. I completely skipped a sentence here, you guys. It doesn't haunt an old hotel or wander throughout abandoned homes. According to this legend, it waits outside along lonely roads and isolated crossroads during those dark hours when most people have already gone to bed. Its name is La Mala Hora, and it can roughly be translated as the bad hour or the evil hour. Now, in New Mexican folklore, however, the name doesn't merely describe a particular time of night. It has become the name given to a mysterious and malevolent presence said to appear to people traveling alone after dark. Now, depending on the version of the story, La Mala Hora may be described as a spirit, an apparition, a shapeshifter, or something far more difficult to define, but nearly every version carries the same warning. If you encounter it, something terrible will become, or may be coming. Man. And in some versions of the legend, someone is going to pass away. The crossroads are particularly important. Again and again, it is said to appear where two roads meet, especially long, isolated country roads late at night. That detail isn't unique to New Mexico. Crossroads have carried supernatural meanings and culture around the world for centuries. They represent a place between destinations, a place where travelers have to make a choice about which direction to take. But in the New Mexican story of La Mala Hora, the crossroads become something darker. They're where the ordinary world and whatever La Mala Hora represents seems to meet. Now, the appearance varies dramatically depending upon who's telling your story. Some people describe a woman dressed in black. Others describe an old woman with a terrifying or unnatural looking face. But one of the strangest description isn't really human at all. According to some versions of the legend, it first appeared as a shapeless black mass lying or moving across the roadway. The darkness seemed almost alive, changing size and form as travelers approached. Okay, it's aura. Okay. Thank you for that. I should have known that. Imagine driving one of New Mexico's isolated roads sometime after midnight. There's no streetlights, no houses nearby, nothing but desert, mountains, and darkness stretching beyond your headlights. Then, as you approach a crossroads, something appears directly in front of your vehicle. You guys, if something like that happens to me, I'm not slowing down. At first, you can't tell what you're looking at. It's not quite an animal, it's not quite a person. It's just simply a mass of darkness. And it's moving. Now, according to some versions of folklore, the black shape can suddenly transform. What appeared to be a shapeless mass, now becomes a woman. Sometimes she's described as an old and hideous monster. Sometimes she appears almost human until the traveler gets close enough to realize that something about her is horribly wrong. Other stories describe her as floating or moving without her feet appearing to touch the ground. Now, there is no single universally accepted description of her, and that's important. This isn't a creature with a fixed appearance like an animal in a field guide. The changing appearance is part of what the folklore. That's what makes it so, I guess, creepy. Now, what remains consistent is the sense of whatever the travelers encounter, it's not supposed to be there. But just seeing it isn't necessarily the worst part, because according to legend, when she appears, it can be an omen of death. Some traditions say the person who sees her may die soon. Others say the death may instead fall upon someone close to the witness. In that version, doesn't necessarily cause the person, the death herself. She announces it. She appears. Her appearance means death is already approaching, even if the person who encounters her doesn't yet know whose death it will be. That distinction makes this folklore particularly unsettling. You could survive the encounter, you could escape the crossroads, you could reach home, lock your door, convince yourself that whatever you saw was nothing more than exhaustion, an animal or a shadow, or your imagination. And then your telephone rings. That idea forms the basis of one of the best known modern tellings of the La Mala Hora legend. In this story, a woman receives a phone call from her friend who is going through a painful separation with her husband. The woman decides that she doesn't want her friend to spend the night alone, so she packs a bag and begins to drive to Santa Fe. Her own husband is away on business, and after speaking with him, she gets into her car and starts to drive. It's late. The trip takes several hours. As the woman's traveling deeper into the night, the roads become increasingly empty. Eventually, she's driving almost completely alone. Darkness surrounds the highway, and she begins to experience the uncomfortable sensation that someone or something is watching her. She looks in her rearview mirror. Nothing. She looks towards the passenger seat. Nothing. She tells herself she's being ridiculous and keeps on driving. Then she approaches a crossroads. As her headlight sweeps across the intersection, something suddenly appears directly in front of her car. a dark shape. She slams on her brakes. The vehicle screeches to a stop. For several moments, she simply sits there and stares ahead, trying to understand what she had just seen. Then the shape disappears. She thinks it's over until she hears something beside the car. It's a scratching sound. She turns towards the window, and there, according to popular tellings, is an old woman staring back at her. But there's something terribly wrong with her face. The frightened driver accelerates away from the crossroads and refuses to stop until she reaches her friend's house in Santa Fe. She rushes inside and tells her friend what happened. Her friend immediately recognizes the description. You've experienced La Mala Hora, the bad hour. And then she tells her friend what the legend means. If you see this and it appears at the crossroads, then someone is going to die. The woman tries to dismiss the superstition, but the encounter has shaken her so badly that she refuses to travel the road again at night and waits until daytime before beginning her journey home. Eventually, she arrives safely. For a moment, perhaps she believes the warning meant nothing. Then a police car pulls into her driveway. The officers have come with some news. Her husband, who had been away on business, was attacked while returning to his hotel, and he had been killed. And according to the story, his death occurred around the same time his wife encountered the strange figure at the crossroads. The tale is chilling, but there's an important distinction to make. The story should not be presented as a verified police case. It's a modern folkloric retelling associated with this tradition. Names and details vary, and there isn't reliable documentation establishing the incident as an actual homicide connected to a supernatural encounter. Its importance lies in what the story tells us about the legend itself. Because La Mala, why can't I say it now? La Mala Hora isn't merely something that attacks travelers. She's a warning. And that's where the legend becomes different from many of the supernatural stories associated with New Mexico. Now we're going to talk about something, you guys. What's up, Vegas? This is a weird one. I wouldn't really I don't, you know what, you guys, let me read it, and then you guys kind of help me. How would we categorize it? What would we have it fall under? The tales hum. In the mountains of northern New Mexico sits the town of Taos, a place surrounded by high deserts, sweeping valleys, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Taos has long attracted artists, writers, spiritual seekers, and people looking for isolation from the noise of modern life. But beginning in the early 1900s, some residents started talking about something strange. It wasn't something that they were seeing in the sky or encountering along lonely highways. They were hearing something, a sound, a low, persistent mechanical, almost like a diesel engine running somewhere far off in the distance. The problem was that nobody could find the engine. The phenomenon would eventually become known as the Taos hum. And more than 3 decades later, the mysterious surroundings that those people were experiencing has never been completely settled. Now, the hum began attracting serious public attention around 1991 or 1992, around that time frame. One of the residents who helped bring the phenomenon to public view was Katana Saltzman, who wrote a letter to Taos Times in March of 92 describing what she was experiencing. She and her husband, photographer Bob Saltzman, said they had begun hearing the strange sounds around their home outside Taos. They weren't alone. Once people began openly discussing it, other residents started coming forward, claiming they also are experiencing the same thing. The descriptions weren't identical, but there were striking similarities. Some people compared the hum as a diesel truck idling somewhere beyond their property. Others described as a distant pump, generator, or even heavy machinery. Some people heard a throbbing or pulsing sound. Others described grinding, hissing, or a low frequency vibration that seemed to sit at the very edge of the human hearing. And then there was one of the strangest characteristics of the entire phenomenon. Most people couldn't hear it. Two people could apparently occupy the same general area, with one person complaining about the unbearable low frequency drone while the others heard nothing. That immediately complicated the investigation. If the hum were coming from a generator, industrial facility, or some other obvious external sources, why couldn't everybody hear it? For the people who could hear it, however, the experience could be extremely frustrating. Some reports difficulty sleeping. Others complained that its sound interfered with concentration or destroying the peace and quiet that had originally attracted them to the area. Contemporary accounts describe residents becoming exhausted and desperate to determine where the noise was coming from. Bob and his wife reported using recordings of ocean sounds at night simply to mask the hum enough for them to sleep. As more residents came forward, the mystery became impossible for local officials to ignore. Residents contacted government representatives, including Congressman Bill Richardson of New Mexico. Richardson initially approached the claim with skepticism, but after hearing from enough constituents, he became convinced that something was happening that deserved investigation. In 1993, a serious scientific team was assembled to investigate the phenomenon. Researchers associated with the University of New Mexico Los Alamos National Laboratory, the Sandia National Laboratories, and the United States Air Force Phillip Laboratories participated. Joe Mullins of University of New Mexico served as a team coordinator, and hearing researcher Jim Kelly later became involved to investigate whether the answers might lie within the human auditory system. So after all of this investigation, teams going out, they still can't find the source of this humming noise. Now, during the controlled matching experiments that they were doing, people who claimed to hear it reproduced tones generally falling somewhere around 30 to 80 hertz, although the exact frequency varies between individuals. That is crazy. How would you guys categorize that? I don't know. Good night, Bear. Now, I've seen this pop up a couple of times in the chat. Someone has mentioned it. Duthe and Archuleta Mesa. What's beneath the mountain? In the far north reaches of New Mexico, close to the Colorado border, sits the small community of Duthe. Duce? Duce? I don't know. It's a headquarters. You know what? I wrote it down. It's the headquarters for the Jicarilla Apache Nation. surrounded by forest, mountains, ranch lands, and vast stretches of country where the night can become extraordinarily dark. Rising over the landscape is Archuleta Mesa, a mass formation straddled the New Mexico-Colorado border. Can someone put my email address in the chat, please? Oh, you are Gator. I gotta talk to you, man. Take down my email address. Will someone please put my email address in the chat? One of my mods. At first glance, there's nothing about the mesa that would suggest anything extraordinary lies beneath it. But for decades, here, I'll do this. There you go. There's my email address, guys. Yes, I will not sure get a hold of you. Okay. I mean to say I will. Okay. All right, now first glance, you guys, there seems to be nothing about this mesa that would suggest anything extraordinary lies beneath it. But for decades, the mesa has occupied one of the strangest corners of American UFO mythology. According to legend, somewhere deep beneath the mountain is a massive underground installation. Depending on which version you hear, the facility contains secret military technology, underground laboratories, genetic experiments, and extraterrestrial beings. Okay. I'll be up for a while, brother. Now, how guys help me pronounce this because Dulce. Is that how you say it? Is that how you say it? Dulce. Even hearing it pronounced, I'm having trouble saying it, but it has become simply known as the Dulce base. Now, there is no verified evidence proving that this underground alien installation exists. Dulce? Is that how I say Dulce? Dulce. I'm going with Gator. Dulce. I got you. Dulce. Okay. What Gator said. Dulce. Okay, I got you, brother. Thank you. No authentic blueprints have surfaced. No independent verified interests have been discovered. No government documents have been produced confirming a joint human extraterrestrial facility beneath Archuleta Mesa. But that's not where the Dulce story begins. The real story begins above ground, you guys, with dead cattle. During the 1970s, ranchers, although throughout part of the American West, began discovering livestock dead under circumstances they found difficult to explain. Cattle were reported with portions of their face, ears, eyes, tongues, udders, or reproductive organs missing. Some ranchers believed the wounds looked unusually precise. Others were disturbed by what they considered an apparent lack of blood around the carcasses. Reports came from numerous states, but northern New Mexico became one of the centers of the mysteries. What's up there, Mitch? How you doing, brother? That's my little brother right there, man. I've known that kid since he was in elementary school. It's like my brother. It's Mitch from the block. Dulce, I got you. Now, so as all of these reports are coming around, they say that New Mexico became one of the centers of the mysteries. One of the men investigating those deaths wasn't a UFO researcher. He was a police officer. His name was Gabriel or Gabe Valdez. And he was a trooper with the New Mexico State Police. Now he has grown up. He he grew up around a cattle. He came from a ranching family and understood what animals look like after being killed or scavenged. Beginning in the mid 1970s, he became deeply involved in the investigating livestock deaths around Dulce and elsewhere in northern New Mexico. One of the most important ranchers in the story was Miguel Gomez. On June 13th, 1976, Gomez reported finding one of his animals dead approximately 13 miles east of Dulce. Valdez responded and began investigating. The case became part of a growing mystery. Valdez, who eventually investigated dozens of alleged mutilations, he became convinced that at least some of the animals he examined had simply died naturally, or hadn't died simply naturally, and that then been eaten by predators. Something else he believed was going on. And then the investigation got even stranger. Reports began circulating of unusual aircraft operating around the area where cattle were being found. Ranchers and investigators reported seeing strange lights. Helicopters became part of the story. Some were even described as unidentified or unmarked. The cattle mutilations phenomenon wasn't confined to New Mexico, and reports of mysterious helicopters were reported elsewhere around the American West as well. Ranchers became so suspicious that authorities in some regions became concerned people might begin firing on legitimate aircraft. Around Dulce, the combination was becoming more difficult to ignore. There were dead cattle that had strange wounds. There were unidentified aircraft being seen. There was lights in the night sky and a remote mountain looming over everything. A remote mountain looming over everything. Then came another Gomez case. On March 24th, 1978, an 11-month-old crossbreed heifer bull belonging to Mr. Gomez was discovered dead and mutilated. The animal displayed injuries that investigators considered characteristics of the mutilation phenomenon. Portions of the reproductive and rectal area had been removed, and investigators described wounds that appeared apparently sharp or precise. Samples were collected. The animal's heart, bone, and muscle tissues were sent to Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory for examination. Liver samples were sent to separate laboratories. Los Alamos detected naturally occurring Clostridium bacteria in the heart tissue, but couldn't determine whether it represented anything significant because post-mortem contamination was possible. The laboratory found no microscopic changes in the heart tissue that proved a clear explanation for the animal's death. Other laboratories tested and produced unusual mineral findings in liver samples, but none of this established that anything extraterrestrial had occurred. The distinction is important. That distinction is important. There were unusual cattle deaths. There were legitimate investigators. Samples were already sent to laboratories, but the laboratory results did not prove that aliens were mutilating cattle. Valdez himself didn't ultimately believe extraterrestrials were responsible. He began moving in a different direction. He suspected people. That's what I would have expected, people. According to statements attributed to Valdez during the investigation, he came to believe whoever was responsible was sophisticated, well organized, and had significant resources. That creates an entirely different mystery, because if people were responsible, what were they doing and why were they doing it? Valdez began considering possibilities involving biological experimentation or environmental monitoring. One theory that developed around the mutilation phenomenon suggested that someone could be secretly sampling livestock to monitor contamination, disease, or environmental exposure. Northern New Mexico gives that theory an especially interesting backdrop. You have the Los Alamos National Laboratory that is located in the state. Nuclear weapons had been developed and tested in New Mexico. The region has decades of military and scientific activity. But again, there's an enormous difference between theory and evidence. Then in 1979, something happened that would connect the cattle mutilation mystery to another story. A man named Paul Benowitz entered the picture. Benowitz was an Albuquerque businessman and electronics specialist that lived near Kirkland Air Force Base and had become fascinated by unusual lights and activity he believed to be observing around the installation. He began photographing lights and monitoring electronic signals. He eventually became convinced that he was witnessing extraterrestrial activity. April 1979, a public meeting concerning cattle mutilation was held in New Mexico. United States Senator Harrison Schmitt and U.S. Attorney R.E. Thompson were involved, and roughly 80 people attended. Gabe Valdez was there, and so was Paul Benowitz. Benowitz approached Valdez and began discussing the unusual activity he believed he was observing near Kirkland Air Force Base. That meeting was enormously important to the Dulce story because two mysteries were about to collide. Valdez had cattle mutilations around Dulce. Benowitz had identified lights and signals around Kirkland. Eventually, Benowitz became convinced that the phenomena were connected, and somewhere along the way, Archuleta Mesa became part of the story. Now, again, there's just rumors of this base. What is if it does exist? What's in it? Is it what they were saying? Is there secret laboratories underneath there? Is there extraterrestrial beings or technology underneath there? Who knows? But again, these are some of the biggest mysteries that are surrounding the UFOs and underground bases there in New Mexico. We're almost done, you guys. Now, I'm going to bring up something here that just may not be. It may be connected, it may not be connected. So before Roswell, before the flying saucer, before the Socorro, before Dulce, and before New Mexico became synonymous with UFOs, something else happened in the desert that didn't just change New Mexico, but changed the world forever. On July 16th, 1945, in a remote section of New Mexico known as the Hornada del Muerto, the Journey of the Dead Man, the United States detonated the first nuclear weapon in human history. The test was called Trinity. And whether you believe what happened 2 years later at Roswell involving extraterrestrials, classified American technology, or nothing more than mystery than a balloon, Trinity gives us an interesting question to consider. Did the beginning of the nuclear age have anything to do with what happened next? To understand the question, we need to go back to the final years of World War II and one of the most secretive scientific programs in American history. That program was called the Manhattan Project, and it was created to develop an atomic weapon before Nazi Germany could accomplish the same thing. Some of the greatest scientific minds in the world were brought together, and one of the most important centers of that effort was established in Los Alamos, New Mexico. There, under the scientific direction of J. Robert Oppenheimer, scientists and engineers worked on something humanity had never created before, a weapon powered by the energy locked inside the atom. By the summer of 1945, they were ready to find out whether or not it would actually work. The location selected for the test was an isolated section of the Alamogordo Gord the Alamo Gordo bombing range in southern New Mexico. The landscape was part of the Orda del Muerto, an enormous desert basin whose Spanish name translates roughly Journey of the Dead Man. Even before anything exploded there, the name sounded like something out of 50 States of Fear when you guys think about it. The device itself was a plutonium implosion weapon. It was sometimes simply called the gadget. It represented an extraordinary, complicated engineering challenge. Conventional explosives had to detonate with extreme precision around the plutonium core, compressing it rapidly and systematically enough to produce a nuclear chain reaction. If it worked, the scientists would prove that an entirely new class of weapons was possible. If it failed, years of work and enormous national investment would disappear in an instant. The gadget was raised approximately 100 feet above the desert floor on a steel tower. Then everyone waited. The test was originally planned for early in the morning, but thunderstorms and poor weather could cause delays. Scientists, soldiers, and observers sat at positions miles away while the New Mexico desert remained dark. Then, at approximately 5:29 a.m. on July 16th, 1945, humanity entered the nuclear age. The gadget detonated. For an instant, the Mexico desert became brighter than daylight. A massive fireball expanded above ground. The steel tower beneath the weapon was essentially destroyed. Sand and soil around the detonation place were subjected to tremendous heat, producing a greenish glass like material that later became known as trinitite. Observers miles away saw the flash. A shockwave rolled across the desert. The explosion produced an estimated yield of roughly 21 kilotons of TNT. Nothing like that had ever happened before. For the first time in human history, an atomic weapon had exploded on Earth. And the people living around the region hadn't been told what was about to happen. That's kind of messed up, man. No, that is messed up. The Manhattan Project was one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. Residents in surrounding communities saw the flash and felt the explosion without knowing what had caused it. Government initially attempted to conceal the truth of the true nature of what had happened. A cover story was prepared describing that an explosion as an accident involving an ammunition magazine. The real explanation wouldn't become public until after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan. Less than a month later, less than a month after Trinity, the United States dropped the atomic bomb called Little Boy on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another weapon, the Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. The Fat Man used plutonium implosion design related to the technology successful demonstrated Trinity. The nuclear age had begun, and New Mexico was where it started. Now, that kind of brings me into what we're going to finally talk about, because then 2 years later, something happened. And what happened was the incident at Roswell, New Mexico. What really crashed in the New Mexico desert? Now, there are a few words in history of the unexplained more recognizable than just a simple name: Roswell. For nearly 80 years, Roswell, New Mexico has stood at the center of perhaps the most famous UFO story in the world. Ask someone who knows absolutely nothing about UFO history to name a place associated with extraterrestrials, and a chance they're going to tell you Roswell. Flying saucers, alien bodies, secret military recovery teams, government cover-ups, and decades of conspiracy have all become part of that legend. But when you strip away everything that came later and return to what really happened in the summer of 1947, the Roswell story becomes fascinating for different reasons. Because something really was recovered from the New Mexico countryside. The U.S. military really did take possession of it. And on July 8th, oh, that's my dad's birthday, 1947, the military really did announce that it recovered a flying disc. Then, only hours later, that story changed. To understand Roswell, we have to begin where the wreckage was discovered during one of the strangest summers in American history. Now, World War II had just ended less than 2 years earlier. The atomic age began. The Cold War was now starting to take shape. Experimental aircraft and missile technology were advancing rapidly, and the United States military was conducting highly classified operations throughout New Mexico. Then, on June 24th, 1947, civilian pilot Keith Arnold reported seeing 9 strange objects flying near Mount Rainier, Washington, in Washington State, my home state. Thank you, Matthew. Arnold described their motion in a way that led newspapers to popularize the new expression of flying saucer. Within days, reports began pouring in from across the country. America had entered its first great flying saucer craze. And only a few weeks later, something strange would be discovered on a ranch in New Mexico. The man who found it was William Ware Brazel, better known as Mac. Now, Mac worked for J.B. Foster for the J.B. Foster Ranch in Lincoln County, roughly 30 miles southeast of southeast of Corna and considerably distance away from the city of Roswell. Now, it's worth remembering because the famous Roswell crash didn't actually happen in downtown Roswell. The debris associated with the original incident was discovered on remote ranch land closer to Corna. Roswell entered the story because that's where the military installation that eventually took possession of the material was located at. Now, according to the account, Mac gave the Roswell Daily record in July 1947. He and his 8-year-old son, Vernon, came across a large area of unusual wreckage while making their rounds on the ranch. Mac described pieces of rubber, foil-like material, tough paper, and lightweight sticks scattered across the ground. Now, at first, he didn't think much about this. Ranch work needed to be done, and strange debris blown across an open country wasn't necessarily something worth dropping everything for. But some time later, Mac returned to the location with members of his family and gathered some of the material. Then he began hearing something on the radio. Flying saucers. Reports of mysterious discs appearing across the country. And Mac began wondering whether the strange wreckage scattered across his ranch might somehow be connected. Eventually, Mac traveled to Roswell and spoke with Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcott. He told the sheriff that he had found something unusual on his ranch. Well, Wilcott contacted the military. And that's when the story took a dramatic turn. See, when you get the military involved, things get messed up. Roswell Army Airfield wasn't just another military installation. Stationed there was the 509th Bombing Group. At that moment in history, the 509th occupied the extraordinary position within the United States military. It was the organization associated with America's first bombing capability. Members of the group had participated in the atomic mission against Japan in World War II. Who knows what kind of planes dropped the atomic bombs? Let me know in the comments. These weren't inexperienced soldiers who had never seen military equipment. They belonged to one of the most sensitive military organizations in the world. The intelligence officer of the 509th was Major Jess Marcel. Marcel was sent to investigate Mac's discovery, accompanied by counterintelligence officer Sheridan Chevette. The men traveled to the ranch to examine the debris field. Material was collected. Marcel eventually returned with some of the wreckage. And then something happened that remains at the heart of the Roswell mystery. The commanding officer of Roswell Army Airfield was Colonel William Blanchard. On July 8th, 1947, the base public information officer, Lieutenant Walt Hott, issued a press release to local media. The announcement said personnel of the 509th Bomb Group had recovered a flying disc. This isn't a story created by UFO researchers 30 years later. It happened in 1947. The announcement went out over the news wires. The Roswell Daily Record ran the story across the front page. The headlines read, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. According to the newspaper, the intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group announced that the field had come in possession of a flying saucer. The report stated that Major Marcel and personnel from his department had traveled to the ranch, recovered the disc, and brought the material back for inspection. The wreckage was then sent to what the newspapers described as higher headquarters. Now, for a brief moment, the United States military appeared to be telling the American public that it had, in fact, recovered one of the mysterious flying discs everyone had been talking about. But then again, the story changed. The material was sent to Fort Worth, Texas, headquarters of the 8th Air Force under Brigadier General Roger Ramey. Reporters were invited in, photographs were taken, and Ramey announced the mysterious flying disc wasn't a disc at all. Can you guys guess what he said this was? The wreckage that they were looking at was a weather balloon. Boulder Dash, that's what I say. Photographs taken inside Ramey's office showed debris spread across the floor. The material visible in the photographs include torn foil-like material, rubber, and pieces of what appeared to be radar reflector. The sensation was apparently over almost as quickly as it began. They called it the little... No, that was named one of the bombs. Thomas, the bomb was the little man. Fat man and little boy. Fat man and little boy. The bomber was the Enola Gay. It was named after the pilot's mother. Now, the sensation was over almost as quickly as it began. The Army had made a mistake. There was no flying saucer. There was no extraterrestrial spacecraft. Everyone, it was just a balloon. Honest. We're the government. We're telling you the truth. It's just a balloon. And for the next 3 decades, Roswell largely disappeared from the national conversation. But even in 1947, there were things about the story that seemed strange. Mack told the Roswell Daily Record that he had found weather balloons on his ranch before, so he knew what they looked like. And he insisted that what he found that time was not, in fact, a weather balloon like he had previously encountered. Mack described the debris as lightweight. He said that there were rubber strips, foil-like material, paper, and sticks. Some pieces apparently included tape with decorative markings or flower-like designs. He estimated the debris had been scattered over an area roughly 200 yards across. He also said there was no obvious engines or propeller or any heavy machinery. Taken by itself, the description doesn't sound much like a crashed metallic spacecraft. In fact, it sounds surprisingly comparable to a weather balloon. But then we're left with one obvious question. If the wreckage was so ordinary, how did the intelligence officers of the 509th Bomb Group examine it without recognizing it as a weather balloon? How did Colonel Blanchard authorize an announcement that his personnel had recovered a flying disc? Why wasn't the debris identified before the announcement was released? Those questions would eventually breathe life back to Roswell. One of the most important people in the resurrection was Major Jesse Marcel. Beginning around 1978, 31 years later, UFO researcher Stanton Friedman learned about Marcel and began interviewing him about the incident. He later His later recollections were dramatically different from the simple weather balloon explanation. He maintained that the material he had handled was unusual. He described it as lightweight material that he believed wasn't any conventional weather balloon wreckage. Later, Roswell accounts attributed extraordinary properties of some of the debris, foil that could supposedly be crumpled but would return to its original shape. Incredibly strong, lightweight material, strange markings and small structural pieces that were difficult to break or burn. Now, this is where we need to slow down and think about it. Those extraordinary descriptions became enormously important to Roswell mythology, but most of them were recorded decades after the original incident. They aren't equivalent to the July 1947 newspaper accounts. That doesn't automatically make the later witnesses dishonest. Human memory changes. Details can become confusing. Stories can influence one another. And after 30 or 40 years separating exactly what someone remembered from 1947 to what they later heard about the case becomes extremely difficult. But Marcel's testimony reopened Roswell. Suddenly, researchers began searching for other people who had been in contact with the event. And that's when Roswell transformed from a story about strange debris into a story about something much bigger. Researchers began collecting testimony claiming there had been additional crash locations. Witnesses came forward claiming that they had seen unusual wreckage. Others claimed military personnel had sealed off areas of the desert. Stories emerged aligning that something much larger than a balloon debris had been found. And eventually the bodies enter the story. This one is one of the most important distinctions in the entire Roswell case. The famous July 47 newspaper story did not report alien bodies. The original Roswell Army Airfield press release did not announce alien bodies. Mac contemporary accounts does not describe alien bodies. The dramatic story involves extraterrestrial occupants became prominent decades later. Several individuals eventually claimed knowledge of bodies recovered somewhere in connection with Roswell. One of the most famous was former Roswell mortician. His name was Glenn Dennis. Dennis claims that while working at Ballard Funeral Home in 1947, he received an unusual telephone call from Roswell Army Airfield asking questions about small caskets and methods of preserving bodies. Now, according to Dennis, he later went to the base and saw unusual activity. He also claims that a nurse he knew told him she had witnessed the examination of small, non-human bodies. Dennis described beings with large heads, slender bodies, and unusual hands. It was an extraordinary story. There was also an enormous problem. Researchers were never able to satisfactorily verify the nurse at the center of Dennis's story, and important portions of his account were challenged. Dennis therefore remains part of Roswell's history, but his claims cannot be treated as established evidence that extraterrestrial bodies were recovered. Other body stories appeared as researchers continue interviewing witnesses. Some involve civilians who allegedly stumbled upon a crash site. Others involved military personnel who supposedly transported the bodies. Still, others involved secondhand accounts from people who claimed relatives had told them what had happened. You see, I went over to Billy Joe's house, and he told me that his cousin Festus took his truck out and he saw something and he picked it up, and his buddy Marlin helped him put the bodies in the backseat of the car. Then they told their third cousin's uncle's mother's father's cousin. That's that's what we're getting at here, guys. The stories sometimes contradicted each other. Crash locations, they multiplied. Numbers of bodies changed. Descriptions changed. Now, from what I know personally, from what I remember reading and seeing about, there was only 2 bodies found. But I wonder how many did Festus actually see? I don't know. What did Roscoe look at? What did he see? But like I said, the descriptions changed, and Roswell gradually became less like one incident and more like a collection of overlapping stories. Then the United States government comes in and revisits the case. Here we go. During the 1990s, New Mexico Congressman Stephen Schiff pushed for greater access to government records concerning Roswell. The United States General Accounting Office, today called the Government Accountability Office, conducted a search for records. The Air Force conducted its own investigation. And in 1994, the Air Force released a massive report titled The Roswell Report: Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. Now, the Air Force acknowledged something important. The material recovered from 1947 probably wasn't from an ordinary weather balloon. Instead, the Air Force concluded that the debris was most likely connected to a classified program known as Project Mogul. And then this brings us directly back to Trinity and America's nuclear program. Project Mogul was a highly classified effort designed to use high-altitude balloon arrays carrying specialized equipment to detect sound waves produced by Soviet atomic bomb tests. The United States had detonated the world's first atomic bomb at Trinity in New Mexico in July of 1945. American leaders knew the Soviet Union was developing its own atomic weapon. Project Mogul was one method being developed to determine when the Soviets succeeded. The balloons themselves weren't necessarily extraordinary, but the purpose of the project was highly classified. Mogul balloons trains could include multiple balloons, radar reflectors, and instrumentation. Some radar targets incorporated foil-backed material, wooden or balsa components, and tape-bearing decorative patterns. So suddenly, some of Mac's 1947 description all starts to make sense. Rubber, foil, sticks, paper, tape with unusual markings. And according to the Air Force, what Mac found wasn't extraterrestrial spacecraft. It wasn't. It was debris associated with a secret American surveillance program. Balderdash. It was, and if that is correct, the military's strange behavior becomes easier to understand. Personnel at Roswell may not have known what Project Mogul was. The project was compartmentalized and classified. Once higher headquarters recognized that what had been recovered, revealing its actual purpose publicly, would have exposed an intelligence operation aimed at detecting Soviet nuclear tests. Come on, man. You don't think for 1 second we don't already know? See, I'm telling you guys right now, they think we're stupid. They think we're dumb. So the public received a harmless explanation. Weather balloon. That's what it was. Case closed, except for many researchers, it wasn't. One major point of controversy concerns exactly what mogul balloon flight produced. Uh, which mogul balloon flight produced the Roswell debris? Researchers, skeptical of the Air Force's explanation, have questioned whether the proposed balloon flight was actually launched and whether its projected path fits the location of Max Ranch. Hmm. You guys, and that's it. That's it. Roswell, New Mexico closes out 50 States of Fear. Wow, 2 hours and 20 minutes. You guys, I had a great time doing this. I had so much fun, so much fun uh, being with you guys here tonight. Like, seriously, I had so much fun doing it. What'd you guys think? Fun night, good show, awesome stories. Thank you so much. Awesome show, my new family. Gator, welcome to the family. I appreciate it. Offbeat, it was fun. Thank you. Chronic, what's up, man? You know, you guys, now if you go back and you look at the very beginning of 50 States of Fear, I think the show has progressed just by leaps and bounds from what we first started talking about when we first started doing. I'm just going to bring you guys, some Bigfoot, some Dogman, and maybe a couple of little ones. And then as I started growing with them, I just realized, I'm not doing the states justice that I really have to really get in there and give you guys things. Really. So, you guys, that's the show for tonight. I just want to say thank you so much for everyone coming in. If you guys are new to the channel, new to the chat, drop a 1 in the comments and hit that subscribe button. I truly appreciate it. Everybody on Spotify, you guys will be listening to this on Monday. Thank you so much for checking it out. I truly appreciate it. You guys, I'm going to close it out the right way. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing all of us to gather here tonight. Lord, I just ask you continue to be present in everybody's life. Be with them and their family. Surround them with healing in their mind, their body, their soul. Lord, if they are hurt, if they are sick, if they're dealing with some type of issue, please, I just ask you go to them, you heal them from the top of their head to the soles of their feet. Surround them with protection. Grant them strength and understanding and courage so they may face all the obstacles that they're facing every single day, Lord. Lord, thank you so much for my wife, my children, my grandchildren, the rest of my family, my friends. In your name I pray, Heavenly Father. Amen. You guys are fantastic. I truly, truly appreciate you guys coming in here tonight. Thank you so much. I hope I did New Mexico justice. Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do the next state. Who knows what the next state's going to be? Who knows? You guys, we're doing the Big Apple. Well, we're not doing New York City. We're doing New York. And I'm telling you, New York is going to be so much fun. So much fun. I can't wait. You guys, one of the most amazing Bigfoot encounters that I've ever covered so far is the Bear Road incident in Whitehall, New York, up in northern New York. And I cannot wait to do it. So, with that being said, you guys, thank you so much. If you guys, again, have not done so, please subscribe to the channel. We are trying our hardest to get to that big number of 10K, but I'll just be very happy with hitting 9,600 and then 9,700. Richie Evans, you and my dad have the same birthday, my brother. So, all right, you guys, I truly appreciate you guys. If you haven't, again, subscribe so you guys know when I'm going live, Monday through Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I don't know. I might sneak in a Tuesday and a Thursday. I don't know. It just depends on how I feel. I don't know. Every Wednesday and Friday we drop new episodes, and every Saturday night, unless I have something planned, which I will have some stuff planned in the future on some Saturdays where I won't be able to do them, but I'll let you guys know. But you guys, we're hitting New York next week. Thank you so much. I'm at 9,600. Hold on, me look. Refresh. 9601. You guys did it. Thank you so much, you guys. I truly appreciate you. You guys, be excellent to each other. You guys are perfect just the way you are. Good night, Sebastian. Good night, Katana. Thank you so much, you guys, for everything you guys do. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, a legend begins with a sighting. I'll see you guys on the next show. See you later, everybody.
And just like that, the night begins to close in. The fire burns a little lower. The woods grow quiet again. But if you've learned anything tonight, it's that silence doesn't mean you're alone. Somewhere out there, beyond the tree line, down that forgotten road, deep in the places maps don't like to go, something is still moving, still watching, still waiting. I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your night with me here on the Cryptid Podcast. Whether you joined us live, shared your thoughts in the chat, or you're catching this later, you're part of this journey now. And remember, these stories don't belong to fear. They belong to the witnesses, to the hunters who stopped hunting, to the hikers who never went back, to the people who looked into the dark and realized the dark looked back. If you've had an encounter with Bigfoot, Dogman, or something you can't explain, your story matters. And one day, it may be told right here on the Cryptid Podcast. Until next time, keep your eyes on the tree line, trust your instincts, and never ignore that feeling that tells you you're not alone. I'm Dano, and this is the Cryptid Podcast. Good night, everyone.